All right, let's get it started because our topic is very serious, earnest, and we have very little time. Without much modesty, let me say the following. From my perspective, our topic probably is more important than the majority of other topics present at this forum, and I will explain why I think so. Look, I am fully confident that sooner or later we will be victorious, we will survive. Why am I confident of that? Because this is in our DNA. We know how to survive. We have been doing this for centuries. I don't know what this victory will be, but we will definitely survive because it's in our DNA. But the next more important point is whether we will be able to build our future. And here there is a very big question mark, because that's not something there's a lot in our DNA. Because again, if we look back centuries ago, there are lots of issues that still remain. So most importantly, today we find ourselves in a historic period when the responsibility for whether or not we will be able to build this future is vested in us. In those present on the stage, gathered in this room, we are all in the same boat. And another conviction of mine is, I will immediately express it, although I'm not a panelist. I'm sure that business is one of the key players. The new Ukrainian business is one of the key players in this country to promote this process. Whether it will be conducive, I don't know. Let's look into that. And before we begin, just two skits. The first skit to imagine is Japan after the Second World War. If you remember, Japan was all in ruins. Towns, cities, infrastructure was all in shambles. There was complete devastation in terms of the trust of the general public in the government. And who was the one to revive all of this? The Japanese business became this entity. The Japanese business became the power that said, we will rebuild Japan from scratch. And the Japanese business coalesced not around corporations, but around different horizontal networks, and they inspired the whole nation, and they said the Japanese economy will be most innovative, #1 in the world. And they breathed this energy and became the heart and the driver to reboot Japan. Now have a look at the role of business in the US after the Second World War. Another interesting aspect, somewhat different. Business began to invest actively, to support actively and nurture and rear organizations of intellectual nature, think tanks. The American business came to realize that in order to manage future, one needs to manage and run narratives, ideas, and concepts, which is why they began to invest actively in these think tanks and various kinds of intellectual institutions. It's a most interesting strategy because money, people, energy, people outflowing the country, they always follow powerful visions, powerful ideas. And in the final count, America was able to rewrite the rules of game on the global arena. So this is all down to business. Now let us get back to Ukraine, our current stage, the role of business to play in that. Whether businesses can become the helper, the promoter for Ukraine, for us to avoid getting again in this loop where we survive and lose, as if we are lacking something. Have a look. This is a kind of a paradigm we are caught in. While we live in this paradigm of survival, we will keep surviving and surviving. We have to change, switch it. So who will do it? We'll have to see about it. During this panel, the panel is a very weird word, but anyway, the majority of these people, you know, they're Ukrainian entrepreneurs. I will briefly introduce them. Valeria Huzema, the founder of Huzema Fine Jewelry. Taras KYTSMEY, the co-founder and board member of SoftServe. Marina Avdyeyeva, the co-owner and the chief of the Supervisory Board of Arsenal Insurance. SERHIY Zhykov, the member of our club, the manager of private capital, the chief or commander of a special unit, a sergeant of the Armed Forces of Ukraine on active duty right now, and Igor KABUZENKO, a managing partner of World Howell. Another thing to mention in this regard, I'd like us to be as formal as we can, as concise as we can. Let us get down to business, speak to the point, and at the end I would like to have some time left, not for your questions, but rather for your answers. Because all of you are just like us, and we would like to hear from you, get your thoughts. At the end, we will provide some time for some 10 to 20 seconds, and we'll be giving the mic to different people to share and swap your visions and experiences. All right, so let's get it underway. At first, let me ask you, friends, what's your take? Raise your hands, those of you who think that Ukrainian business is rather subjective nowadays, that it can shape the rules of the game in this country, and is doing so. All right, 0.3% of the attendees think so. What's your take? And raise your hands if you think that Ukrainian businesses should become subjective and eventually will have to begin to shape these rules of the game. Not too many either. Huh. Interestingly, don't get embarrassed. So now I would like to start us talking at this panel. Let us begin with diagnosing their feelings, or what makes them tick, the role of the Ukrainian business during the war. So what do you think? What is the role of that in economic, social area, defense capability, the state policy? Do you think that this role is sufficient? What is the place that business should occupy in the hierarchy of all of our institutions, both public and non-public? The role of the Ukrainian business, your sentiments during this war, where is it? In a random order, but please try to be pithy. Well, business, from my perspective now, is trying to do a most important thing, is just trying to make ends meet, to survive. And this is our supreme motivation, no country, no business, so it's helping the country very actively by being white, paying taxes, and making a lot of donations. But I do agree that the war has amended, has changed businesses. We are no longer mere businesses. We are already a part of the resilience system of this country, and our mission now has to become broader. I raised my hand in answer to the first question, whether business can build this country. Yes, I do think so. It can help the government, not only in terms of money, but in the first place intellectually. And we know very well all of these examples, the US, Germany, where the government is based on intellectual participation of corporations. Thank you. SERHIY now. I will try to be informal and concise, but this is a super difficult thing for me. My point is, just like from the first day of war, both then and now, business plays the big role with capital letter B. And we have to be aware, be conscious of that, because on the one hand, Marina has put it properly, the business is making its ends meet, and on the other hand, it's also saving, rescuing others. How this is going to end? Well, we have to think about it. But the role of business to play, everything that I will say today, I will say it on behalf of someone who has been professionally deformed as a military serviceman, but I know what happens within business anyway, and I'm completely confident that without business, this country would definitely not be here. The way business demonstrates itself at whatever level, whatever rank of responsibility it may be, representatives of business will occupy. I can tell you that the army wouldn't survive, wouldn't hold out without the involvement of business in Ukraine. So the role of business, unfortunately, is not acknowledged here, and the task of this business is to make sure everything gets done right in order not to lose this role. Igor, please. When you say business, I translate it as private business, first of all, because we say that the share of private business in the Ukrainian economy is not that big in comparison to other economies. Our public sector occupies a much more appreciable part of the economy. So the Ukrainian business is not something that decides anything in this country or determines anything. Rather, it's a supporting element in whatever kind of capacities. The Ukrainian business at that is also crucial because it helps, it steps in where the system is incapable of adding or creating something new, doing something much needed. So business comes to fill in the loopholes and gaps which emerged since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. It used to perform the same function during the revolutions, for example, but now this role has become so much more tangible. So it has become this kind of a glue. On the one hand, it's not the bearing construction, but it still sticks together so many things, revives and nurtures many things. But I think that this role is most substantial in this regard. Taras? Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. To keep it brief, everything has been said in a nutshell. Well, what business is nowadays, it works in several fronts. Our core front, of course, is making products, generating income, and we have some other front lines. And during the war, something that business assumed. First of all, it's people who are our employees, IT industry, massively relocated people from the east to the west of Ukraine or abroad Ukraine, supporting them with accommodation, housing, work. Then it's a whole lot of different humanitarian projects. Then there are a lot of projects which are to do with improving the defense capabilities of our country. So business is working actively on that. We're very much proud of our business. Thank you. Thank you. Greetings. Indeed, everything has been mentioned, so I will just add one thing. In addition to economic indicators and helping the frontline, business is also a highly incentivizing and maintaining this bar of emotional calm and quiet, thus enabling people to see a positive picture of the future, because for people it matters enormously to see that, okay, these companies are not fleeing the country, they are staying here and they keep working. Moreover, they keep developing and helping. And in every way, they keep signaling we're here, we believe in the victory, and we will continue working and helping. So for the society, it's of utmost importance. Thank you. Thank you all. Now let us revert to the key question, the key matter of our today's discussion or dialogue, if you like. If the role of the Ukrainian business has to change, whether business has to be more cognizant of its own role, not of something which comes in to stitch together and cover different holes. And then they begin to point fingers at you, saying that 36 different criminal cases have been initiated around you, something that we are suffering within our club. They initiate these cases, and then they close them, initiate, and then fold them down. So should the role of the Ukrainian business amend at this historic moment, and how? Should business become a more important player and a co-creator of the new Ukraine? Marina.
I believe that the obligation of Ukraine now is to create the grounds for business in Ukraine to be able to grow and develop, so that there is enthusiasm in starting to bring people back, for the GDP to be able to increase, so that we are able to fund our armed forces, to add to the military fund. To create the conditions for this to happen, the policy must be business-oriented, business-centered. And what are the components of this kind of policy? Who knows better than the business themselves? Therefore, I do believe that business must and it's capable of taking the active responsibility and the role of a proactive player that will be there communicating and in cooperating with the state. I believe it's very favorable when entrepreneurs with very good professional background get together. For example, is create some sort of councils or unions and communicate with the state. We can communicate with state in various formats where it can be something proactive when we raise certain initiatives, or it can be done in a more conservative way where a state initiates something and we provide quick response. And we had cases like this. For example, a year ago or so, we were lacking drones, and the state reached out to the business, and the business was able to offer the funding. And now we know that there is a company that manufactures 200,000 drones per month. This is an example of how, in the conservative way, there can be very productive cooperation and the promotion of economical stability of the country. Therefore, I believe that yes, we need to be active and get together. Thank you, Marina. I totally agree with everything that was said, but let us speak in greater detail about uniting, because this uniting and unity and unification, it's said so much, and it needs to become like more specific in terms of what it's done. Okay, let me say that yes, the key point here is why and how business needs to make a contribution. Well, first of all, it's for the sake of providing one of the basic components for the defense capacity of a country, which is economy. Napoleon was once asked, what does he need to be able to win? He claimed that he needed three things: money, second is money, and the third is also money. Therefore, economy is not the only, but a very valid part of the defense capacity of our country, and business can influence that. How can business impact those things? First of all, it's unity. It goes without saying, but I also believe that it's very important for business to not have this minority syndrome, and they always claim that they're under granted something or they're getting something taken away from. We want the business to have a realization of the social responsibility and the state responsibility. The responsibility not so much for the society, for the public, but for the state itself. I hope that we'll be able to talk more about this later on. Anyone else would like to comment on this? Does the business need to become a different sort of player? Okay, then let me ask you the following question. Let us step back a little bit. What do you think? Who is creating the strategic framework of the country today? What should be our directions? What should be our focus of effort? Does the state do that? Do the donors? Or do the business players or international institutions? Who is in our country now creating this agenda? What will Ukraine need to reach 10 years after now? Who is behind this design of the agenda? Who are the key players, the key designers of the agenda for the future of Ukraine? And is there any contribution, any role of business in that? Well, I believe that the agenda today is being created by the armed forces of Ukraine and the national army, and the business as well, because we are used to this approach that since the full-scale invasion, seeing what business has been doing for the army and for the state and for every military in particular, we can say that the agenda is being formed by the business both consciously and indirectly, because they're also funding the charitable foundations, the CSOs, and so on. I cannot see the state doing this, designing the strategy of Ukraine. On the one hand, the state closes their eyes on the certain principle of the minority syndrome. So we said that Ukraine feels this kind of insecurity, and now we mentioned that so does the business. But on the part of the business, we do understand our ultimate role, our key role in what is happening at the moment, from the point of inventing new military technologies and how we are able to change the world warfare doctrines and how we influence the development of other countries and continents. For some reason, we are not aware of this, and I believe that this is the problem. We should not be the ones that are asking, but we should be the ones that are cooperating, sitting at the same table with the representatives of the state. I believe that this strategy of development can only be done as a cooperation and co-creation, and it is the only avenue that the state should be moving in. Valery, let me add here that, strategically speaking, Ukraine is not really in this place. Me personally, I don't believe that they are putting out fires, and the same situation is happening at the front line. Politicians, they think in the cycles of elections. I think you have heard it very frequently that we have survived this and we will survive those. And the same stands true for the executives. They are limited by the budget. The front line is also engaged in some kind of strategic approaches, but as far as I know, and so does the public, the situation is very complicated and we are forced to put out these fires. I believe that business is one of the very few components that do think ahead, plan 10 years ahead, 20 years ahead. Business can set the progress, set the stage for technological inventions and development, and really drive the country by certain senses and display Ukrainians not as victims of war, but also as leading actors in various domains, as companies. And I do believe that business, especially the groundbreaking one, they are trying to move in the industry, not just product-wise, but also pass on their cultural treasure and the innovations. And I believe that, as was rightfully mentioned by SERHIY, of course, the army comes first, but the private sector is also helping set the stage for the country to pose in a different way, not as a country at war. Let me go back to one of my favorite subjects. Sooner or later, I do hope that it thrives in Ukraine. We have a nation of patriots. We have a very powerful army. We have creative entrepreneurs that manage to survive in unreal conditions. They overcome the state, they overcome their competitors, and then they are headed to the international market regardless of the war and the crisis. Dozens of millions of Ukrainians live all over Ukraine, and half the world supports us. And it is all energy, and it is all huge amounts of energy, and we can collect it all. We can accumulate this energy around Ukraine. But in order to do that, all of us need to have this vision. We need to everybody to see a beautiful picture. This is what Ukraine looked like 10 years after now. Take a look at this candy. If you want to be part of this, you need to engage. If this vision is present, if it's not just somewhere in a document or as at a desk somewhere buried, if it's seen by 10% of the active population, we can accumulate the energy of the whole civilization around this vision and it will start working. But we lack it at the moment. That's why we're going in circles. We survived and we rise and we fall. We rise and we fall again because we do not see a clear way where we're headed. So my question is the following. Maybe I will ask Taras. Taras, do you think business needs to take responsibility for creation of the vision of the country's future, or what role can it play in this process? Thank you. Well, like in any company and in business as a whole, values are very influential part. If you compare Ukraine and Russia, the values are different, and the managers use these values. In Ukraine, there are certain values that that really counteracted certain governments. It's the values of freedom and liberty, and if we change them, the government will follow. Let me give you a simple example. We all want to have a strong country and strong economy. Nobody will argue that. But if you ask the public, do you want to see powerful businessmen? There will be diverging opinions, although everybody understands that powerful businessmen will create powerful teams. There will still not be a unanimous opinion because in this country the attitude towards business is similar to like this private property. So what will happen to a businessman if his car is taken away from him? The society will not suffer from it, for example. But if we take a look at the business, we need to regard it as a joint common public asset. It is not so much private as it can be seen. What will happen if Nova Post stops its operations? It will not just be the businessman, the founder that will suffer. It will also be the public because the business also creates jobs, and it is not arguable here. People get jobs from business. Business pays taxes. Business has huge corporate social responsibility. And I really would like the state to regard business as a common asset. At the moment, business is regarded as a source of tax income. If business is in debt and owes a few thousand hryvnias of that tax, let's stop it. Just for the sake of a few thousand of tax money, the business can be stopped and a number of people can lose their jobs and so on. But it needs to be regarded as a comprehensive picture. Why did this happen this way? Well, generally speaking, I believe that there are two reasons for this. First of all, we are still carrying the heritage of the Soviet Union, and we're judged by the businessmen that were in those early years of privatization. So this common opinion did not arise for no reason. Therefore, first of all, if we want to have a successful business, we need to create a setting for the public to love business and the businessmen. So what can be done? Well, first of all, make sure that the people working in your companies are loyal and that they are happy in your company. Second is the corporate social responsibility. Take a broader look. I'm not saying that we're not doing it. Maybe we're not doing enough because the general public opinion at the moment is prevalent.
then we will have a chance to dictate different terms and conditions to the authorities. I can talk much about how to coalesce, how to create different associations like IT Ukraine, set up TE Ukraine, established our own association. We are in strong cooperation with the Ministry of Digital Transformation, and we are not complaining. IT business. You questioned who thinks that they can exert influence. IT business can exert that influence. We honestly believe in that we are impactful. We have developed a Dear City mode, and this mode was developed in very difficult confrontational relations. I wouldn't say that we saw eye to eye with the Ministry of Transformation, but basically, if people are intelligent, even though they conflict with each other, they will end up being friends. And this is what we have. We enjoy very good friendly bonds. So this is the first part of my answer to this question. I can carry on and on. But the second bit of my answer to your question is, the war will come to its end. But problem number one in this country, of course, is demographic situation. We have to think about what we are going to do when people get back. People will only get back if we have here high paid salaries, because they have already partaken of dignified working conditions abroad, high salaries abroad. Can we become better than them? And of course, here opinions may divide, but I don't think it's hard for us to become better. Our country simply has to become competitive in terms of attracting foreign direct investment. Have a look at Singapore, Dubai, where they have a sea of investors, and they go there not to invest in oil, but they go to invest in sand, trade, etc. Because fantastic conditions for investors to come have been created. Transparent regulation, permissions to run your business is very streamlined. Regulations, so when investors come, you know, if an investor invests 1 million in their economy, then the GDP grows by 4 million. And you know why? Because he has invested 1 million, it stays here, it circulates among the people. People go to supermarkets, they buy goods. Then the supermarket keeps moving, so the money makes 4 circles per year. And if 1 million comes in, we become 4 times as rich. Because the amount of sold product equals the amount of bought product. So GDP, usually they calculate that based on how much people buy or how much people sell. It has to be the same on a par. So basically, in order to attract foreign direct investment, you do not have to tax it in the first cycle. Let the first cycle be zero taxed, and tax the second, the third loops, and then investors will come if your regulation is fine, and then you will be able to reap the fruit at cycle 3 or 4. So it's not very difficult to set up such rules, and they're not easy to adhere to. Thank you. They're not difficult to adhere to. All right, Taras, thank you. I had many questions prepared for this panel, but I would like to still stick to the first one, because in my opinion, we're still failing to answer it. Look, all of us know how to be happy. What makes us happy? There are millions of books. All wisdom speaks in favor of that. We all know how to be successful. We all know how to build a successful country. But the key question remains, who will have to do it? After the war is over, who will do it? You know, I usually compare our country to the Soviet Union car of Zaporozhets. So imagine this old battered car gets filled with new, adequate people. Will it get going? Definitely not. And Russia will immediately infiltrate this country, and again, it will play a key role here. So what is the role that business has to play? Do we have to go just like the Americans did it after the Second World War, by way of shaping intellectual institutions, seeing these concepts and imposing it on politicians? Or do we have to do it on the contrary, like in Japan? Do we have to become a driver? What is the vision of business? Do we have to go for more other than just being efficient? Because by creating associations and interaction with Zaporozhets automobile, you know, it will remain where it is. It's not a promising future. And we think, blimey, there are so many different associations in Ukraine. Fantastic proposals submitted, Facebook accounts, but Zaporozhets is not moving. There's something wrong. Our approach is definitely faulty. Something needs to be changed. So my fear is that we will get stuck in the same cycle of survival. Survival and then dropping down. So do you think that the role of business needs to change, and how? Igor? I will try to give an answer to both your previous question and this one. In your previous question, you asked who has to assume responsibility for the vision for Ukraine. And classically speaking, it is usually done by the national elites, whatever country it may be, right? Let's go on. The national elite. It usually consists from different walks, strata, business, economic, law enforcement, the military, intelligence, clergymen, officials. I mean, all of them represent the national elite. And this elite will have to define the future of the country. They have to shape this vision. Now let's talk about the following. The elite will shape the vision which is beneficial for that elite. If this elite can meet its own interests in a legitimate way, this elite will process and develop this vision to allow it to preserve what it has obtained and expand, go for expansion. But if this elite has no adequate, legitimate means of meeting its needs, it will create a vision that will protect all the kinds of legitimate means and measures to meet its own needs. So let's question the Ukrainian elite, the elite which is really impactful on the key decision-taking in this country. I'm not talking about just one person. I'm talking about 5,000 people. So this elite, they're meeting their own needs. Do they do that in their legitimate way? Definitely not always. And thus, in this equation, we see that the vision that this elite is shaping, the future vision, will, of course, be protective of their own interests. And thus, we will be walking in the same vicious cycle up until the point we have the elite that will get these legitimate ways to meet its very ambitious needs. The more ambitious is the elite, the more competitive is this nation, because then it can resist and oppose the elites of other nations. So the task is to set up our own national elite, which will be both competitive and legitimate, just as it's done in classical terms. The civil society helps the elite to become more legitimate and more competitive. In Ukraine, it's very hard, because the civil society comes from self-governance, stems from self-governance, and the legacy in Ukraine is such that we're only beginning to develop this self-governance. So our civil society is actively developing, but it's not strong enough to support the local elite to become what it should be. And I guess the role of the business, your first question about it, business needs to help come to the aid of the civil society and to the aid of the national elite to get to the level of quality, I can put it that way, for this elite to begin to generate the visions that will be helpful and useful to the entire Ukrainian society for years and years to come. Thank you. I.e., your point is that business needs to assume a greater responsibility, do more than make donations and pay taxes, much more than that. But the question is also what kind of role it should be or responsibility, because it differs from the way it was yesterday or even today. Let me add, as a direct answer to your question, if we speak about the vision in the broad terms, the vision of the government or the country, I do agree that it needs to be shaped by the wide circles of those that belong to this country and that usually go by the name of elite. But if we're talking about the economic component in the government strategy, then I believe that 100% this needs to be done by business, because businesses contain huge intellectual resources which the governments don't. We have expertise, we have international connections, we have the leaders that can be involved in reforming entire fields and areas, and we have the proper visions of how to create ecosystems that will have to become a key element to raise economic efficiency for our economy. We know how to do all that, but like you said, if you speak about a candy, a kind of a PR made for the country at the international arena, who can do it better than business? We can say we have leader companies, market leaders like Nova Poshta, Monobank. I don't want to list them all, but we have a lot of really great companies world over. They are known. If you want to be with us, if you want to invest in Ukraine, to end up having the same business, so we assume this responsibility to make such conditions. So to do business not just for ourselves, because we are part of the resilience system for the entire country and for the whole other countries too, contributing to the competencies of other countries and competition in the market, however strange it may sound. Well, you may have heard a lot from the previous panel, Konstantin Yefimenko, when he stood up and he said how a young and progressive business should behave in response to challenges presented in the capacity of those that are still carrying the legacy of the Soviet Union. So this is the stance of being an active investor. But when we are talking about collaboration with the state, somehow, by default, the business usually assumes the role of a passive investor. The investor basically gives away all of this function of governance to the state, to the government, thinking that the results somehow will be different. They will not be different. Yesterday I had a great statement in response to the question, what is a business? It's like a firefighter who has a mission, vision, and a strategy. So let's make believe that we have to become this fire system to stop being firefighters, because otherwise we will end up only putting out fires. So we have to assume a more active role as businessmen in assuming partnerships with the government. I don't know what forms they may be. They may be whatever, but this should be the core of it. Thank you, friends. Now I want you to kick in. 1 minute at most in response to the question, what is the role of the Ukrainian business to help the government and to help this state to be? If you have a vision, no philosophical thoughts, if you have the understanding of what Ukrainian businesses have to do in order to go beyond the boundaries of the standard, please raise your hands. You will have up to 1 minute. We have a mic, and I will tell you when your time is up. Serhiy. Greetings. I agree with Serhiy and everyone to keep it simple and short. Now our national agenda is being shaped by the defense forces. The most numerous category of all of the military are entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs who are fighting are also shaping our national agenda. It's a cool name. New horizons of business responsibility. So we are merging the two things. I mean, now we have a possibility to shape our national agenda. However, we don't have the elite, we have the top. And of all this cohort of businessmen, we are shaping the foundation to create these elites. And now the role of the business is not to miss out on these opportunities, because you assume the role of elite makers. It's a new responsibility and a new horizon of contemporary Ukrainian entrepreneurship. Thank you, Serhiy. Will you please get yourself introduced. Good afternoon, everyone. Nadia Vasilevska, an entrepreneur, president of Business People Club and founder of the Ukrainian platform, Ukrainian Women in Business. First of all, let me thank you, because there are so many reflections that I have in response to all of your thoughts about the necessity to get united. My idea is that business in Ukraine at present can become subjective, can become a real subject by just uniting. We have to come up with business associations and unions that will evoke various kinds of elaborations and developments for the national legislation. When we see that we have a lot of horizontal connections in regions, not only in capitals, but in regions, when we do not just sign memoranda of understanding which remain on paper, but when we interact, when we engage with each other, develop, and thus develop a new contemporary economy and a portrait of our entrepreneur. When we understand that our employees fall in love with our businesses and we popularize entrepreneurship as a form of activity, that it's fashionable to become a businessman, rather than it's an absolution of all of your sins on the one hand, and on the other hand, you become a target for all of the dogs that are pitted against you. So once again, it's not only in big cities that these business associations should begin to actively engage with each other without competing or measuring up in terms of their merits, but in terms of active collaboration in regions, enjoying their horizontal connections. Then we will have an opportunity to show the true face of the Ukrainian business, both domestically and internationally.
Okay, let me offer a small comment. I totally agree that uniting is crucial because it involves more cooperation, but it is not enough now. I have been in this for a while now, and I see that this unity, all of this talk does not really have effect. There must be a plan. There must be an agenda. When there is an agenda, a specific to-do list, then you can become a player. If there is no agenda, then a unity is just futile. Thank you. Hello, my name is AVDYEVA. I'm the leading partner of the legal attorney unity Kaiser and a member of the National Association of Attorneys in Ukraine. I have heard what the speakers, the panelists were saying about making the business legitimate and supported by the state. A lot has been said about the unity and the joint force and effort. And let me highlight the legislative changes that were passed. It's the law on lobbying. Therefore, talking about small businesses, we're not talking about holdings and corporations, just small businesses need to come together and promote their interests through using the law of lobbying. I believe that not enough attention is being paid to the legislative changes. There are now created a great number of associations and unions that are implementing this law of lobbying. You are welcome to put out your initiatives on changes using this tool, and the state has already made this step forward. It is just the beginning, but I'm confident that this can give you what you're talking about today. Thank you, dear friends. Let me pitch in a little bit. Lobbying is great, but we are lobbying inside the Zaporozhets. We need to change the car. So lobbying can stay. I think there's someone who wants the mic. Lana Sinichkina, the partner of company Artsinger. Thank you for this discussion. I have a few thoughts that I would like to share. First of all, business needs to be independent and a standalone partner, sitting at the round table with other institutions, not only state, but also CSOs, the public. It's also one of the separate actors, but it needs to be an independent partner. So my idea is that business should not replace the state. It is critical to understand, because there was a time where there was an opinion that all businessmen need to leave their businesses and to become politicians, go into the state. But I think it's not the solution, because business does not have the capacity and the knowledge required for managing a state. I originate from business myself, and I do a lot from the point of view of jar and logic, but it is not enough. Business administration is one thing, and public administration is a totally another thing. It needs to be taught. I mean, there's education involved. What I mean to say also is that business needs to invest in the development of education and culture. If business does it in a good quality manner, then public administration is done by new people that have totally different values and qualities. This can also trigger the transformation. Education and culture is also the key. Lana, thank you so much for your input. Could you kindly pass the microphone over to this part of the hall? Luba Shipovich, Foundation Dignitas. Let me go back to the defense aspect, because so that the future becomes actual, we need to start working about it today. Business in the defense area now shows so passive engagement. It's donations and support to certain defense units, but business can take a more active role. I'm talking about the private PPO. I believe that this sector of air protection is very conservative, but at the moment, the protection of our facilities and plants, it can also become part of our job. The state provides with a mechanism of voluntary units for territorial defense that are now taking on the responsibility of mobile fire units. They can be used by business to as a means of private protection if they are equipped with Shahed interceptors and so on. It can still remain your private air protection units that can protect your capital investments. It's much better to protect yourself rather than rise again from destruction. I'm happy to consult you on what can be done. You're welcome to reach out to our foundation Dignitas. We are happy to consult you on this. Thank you, Luba. Luba is definitely an expert, so I highly recommend. Anyone else? Okay, and also somebody from the back of the hall. But kindly stick to the time limit. My name is Yulia Cebulska, Poltava Regional Council. I'm also a business owner. I can speak on behalf of the self-government and the commercial part. Therefore, let me comment on what was said by the previous speakers. Going back to the question of training, it's true, and training is much required by the business and the public sector as well. And the public sector is now rather inertial. Maybe that's why we're still sitting in the Zaporozhets, in the old car. A week ago, I was present at the Council of Women Entrepreneurs that was aimed to combine businesses and the state regulations, the state responsibilities. So you, SERHIY, have a huge experience of joining efforts. I have a certain vision, and I will talk then I will present the results when we have it. So you mentioned that we need to have the agenda, and this can influence and that can help us change the car. Thank you. Well, it is not my question to answer, but let me just add here that the civilization is guided by a small collection of ideas, the narratives. For example, 10 ideas, and it's not material substance that designate everything. Idea leaders really designate reality. Hello, everyone. Thank you for a chance to speak. My name is Irina Mushtina, a Power of Place company. I totally, absolutely agree with your analogy of the Zaporozhets, of this old car, and I believe that this can be changed from the bottom up. It is not so long ago that I looked through a huge research where 80% of Ukrainians see as the main problem is corruption. And I think 56% believe that the most valuable part, the greatest advantage in our country is the possibility to find ways around. Therefore, it contradicts each other, and this hinders our development. How can this be changed. It needs to be done on every level. And when business needs to be liked, but also the business needs to educate people to create this common agreement in our country. It is only then that we will be able to change the projects for Mercedes. Two more comments that we still have the time to listen to. Can you raise your hand once again, please? Hello, everyone. There was so much spoken about the national elite, but this is something that we need to start with. What I have been observing is that the national elite, they don't know in general what business is. But we are facing very frequently that national elite did not start with business. They gained their assets from the state sector, the politics. Therefore, the state and business, they use different rules for operations. Therefore, when we want to start creating new national elite, we need to know that they should be taught business principles, not starting with the institutions of education, but also train all members of the elite about the principles of business. And this will enable us to build our whole new vehicle that will be able to drive in a different way. Well, the classic regard of elite, it's not just the politicians, it will also include businessmen and so on. Okay, one more commentary. Thank you so much for the discussion. I think we have heard so much, many valuable ideas. My name is Yulia. I'm from the high-tech center. We are also working towards changing the Zaporozhye to something else. We are creating the technologies that are resolving the problems of the state, including the issues of increasing the transparency. We have a project where we have identified the problems of the state that can be resolved by IT tools, and on our behalf we're doing all we can, but also the companies abroad really appreciate that Ukraine is rapid and innovative and really at those problems. If anyone is interested to know more, I'll be happy to speak. Thank you so much for your engagement, but we are limited in terms of time. Let us go back to our discussion and let us finalize by giving our panelists just a bit of time to speak, something that can be taken away from our discussion. Of course, having just an hour, we could just touch upon very briefly. Okay, Ihor. Regarding the inferiority syndrome, how can we remove this from business? I believe that the business must assume the responsibility for the country through the analysis of various projects that are present in the country and funding those projects, because we at the moment are in a position where our future, and I'm not talking about the battlefield, but our safety beyond the front line. We are supported by the donors, but no one can do it better than the Ukrainian business. Therefore, we need to join our efforts and our capital and become the client and take a look and examine the projects that are ongoing and support those that can really improve our country. This is one of the key things that can be done by our business. And in the CEO Club, we are now working on such systems. Thank you. Anyone who's ready? Okay, let me add to the subject. I just recently went to Volyn University, and there was a big event visited by lots of people regarding the change in innovation. Why did this happen, it's because they are local leaders. The rector of the university is also in connection with local authorities, and I was thinking, could the Ministry of Education promote these changes? I'm the head of the the Minister of Education has 150 universities as a sphere of influence. I think that we're talking so much, but we're trying to make God come down and change things for us. But it's our responsibility to do it. We need to create associations. I wonder why universities do not have associations. We need to know how to join our efforts, but Lviv Catholic University just says, go and do it. Thank you. Let me give it a try to stick to the time limit. I want to conclude with what I started with. We do not have any doubts that Ukrainian business is responsible. We all know that. We have been saying this for forever now, and it will be the same tomorrow. But we, as a Ukrainian business, we need to take a look from a different perspective at our value.
We have to rethink it. Because we are doing what we are doing today by default is a minimal level. Because the culture of responsibility in Ukraine, well, we are a country at war. We don't know how it's going to happen in the future. And rethinking, revisioning this role and responsibility needs to take place now. What do I mean by that? I mean that businesses have to realize that without assuming an additional role, transformational role, assuming this new understanding that they have to become an indelible part of statecraft at whatever level, decentralization of authority in regions. We will keep moving in this Zaporozhets vehicle. But in order to endeavor to craft a new vehicle of the level of the responsibility in our country, the country at war, is definitely inadequate. It's substandard. So we definitely need to have a look at what we have and realize that what is being done by the Ukrainian business, and a lot is being done by the Ukrainian business now. And then when we sit down at the table of partnering conditions with the government, with the state. You know, in business, you never say to business, come up with initiatives. You usually say, come on, bring something solid. Partners sit at the same table, they share responsibility and share in the benefits, and only then can we count on some positive outputs. Marina, please. Well, my main reflection on our discussion is the understanding that our age of individual success is over. Now instead is the age of mutual resilience, and the Ukrainian companies simply cannot afford the luxury of acting sporadically, disconnectedly, because we have lots of different crises in front of us, looming over us, lots of things and issues with healthcare, with demography, etc. So we need to unite and shape this new intellectual capital. Businesses right now, they are a moral compass and a social canvas to a lot of people in this country. There are so many projects engulfing different fields and sectors being supported by business. So the main competence of business is to be able to do business. How this can be engaged in order to support statecraft in this country. Probably better businesses, the most efficient businessmen will have to sit down and write down the strategy of the economic development for the entire country. This probably should become a kind of a document which, as agenda, will have to be contributed on our behalf. Thank you, Valeria. My reflection is as follows. Today a lot has been said about uniting, combining, but merging, but most of these are different walks of life, politicians separately from different other representatives of society. And this is where I think the biggest problem is, because the society is not ready to support businesses. They're mistrustful of politicians. They only trust the army nowadays. So to combine these four sectors, I think the army, like no one else nowadays, is in great collaboration with business. The army can demonstrate that there are companies, there are entire fields and sectors where businesses can and should be trusted. And by way of lobbying, uniting the army business and the society, I think it will be possible for us to build this new vehicle. However, along with that, we must not neglect education, because we can only begin, but other generations will come and keep working on it. Thank you all. Let us thank all of our panelists. And thank you. Give yourselves plaudits, please. And thank the organizers, because they pose proper questions. If we have right questions, then we have the right discussion. We have points of touch, and actions begin to stem from that. I believe in you. I believe in Ukraine. Let's build new Ukraine together. A question, please. Well, it's too late, I'm afraid. We will communicate about that. I was speaking about the state machinery, rather, state mechanism, but not the entire country when I made that reference. The speaker is not using the mic, so the questions and remarks are inaudible, because I think that our state is a problem, and wherever we are right now, this is something that our state is at fault for. Thank you, friends.